just recently had a challenging interaction with somebody, and my video's a bit wonky, or if it matters. And so I thought I'd vlog about it just to kind of clear the decks a little bit. And so this was someone who I guess there's many relationships or connections in my life that I've sort of had to distance from as my mental health has worsened, and it's almost out of necessity to do that. And I think this person who enjoyed my company, so they had feelings, lots of feelings about me not seeing them anymore, and they're trying to understand why. And so reached a kind of reached the difficulty of me trying to explain my health, which throughout the vlogs I've kind of brought up, and how frustrating it is for me and difficult to do that. And so I was in that situation today, almost in a sense a little bit cornered, because I saw them outside as I was walking down the street, and before I knew it I was sort of waving at them. I guess I didn't want to slyly walk past and hope they don't see me, because then if they did see me, I don't know if it would seem obvious that, but part of me in retrospect wish I was able to not have that interaction. So it's kind of my microphone wire is caught. That's good. There we go. So yeah, it was stressful because one thing to understand is people are not perfect. So the things they were saying to me were things that I didn't feel like I wanted to hear or needed to hear. And I'm trying to kind of give that person their own space, because it feels like they were kind of responding to my presence and they had lots of stuff to say. And for example, in order for me to while I was listening to that person, I was feeling drained, and it wasn't just a person, it's just also the factor that I find it talking and listening very, very difficult. So it was almost hard to explain that. I wasn't able to say the words as I'm saying now, because I think they had a lot to say, so it was hard for me to kind of, which is one of the difficulties sometimes when I've distanced from people who may have a strong energy and have a lot to say, and it's often hard to a lot to absorb, I guess, in terms of the energy. And it was hard to kind of get that across to them. As he stood there, they were there with somebody else. It was kind of it did feel a tiny bit awkward while the person they were with was kind of listening to the conversation there. And it wasn't one where I could quickly walk away from. And it was just that, I really didn't need to absorb it. And I just didn't think they understood how delicate my health is, that even that conversation, took a lot out of me. And it was that sort of gap in understanding and sort of absorbing it. I think I think I did well in regards to trying just to listen to them. But I could sense we were on two different radio frequencies in regards to understanding. They were, sharing a little bit of wisdom with me, and it's very tricky because in that short space of time there was almost a tightness to the conversation where they're quickly trying to get in some wisdom to help, but without realizing that perhaps there is wisdom within me, that I understand that what I'm doing is not just maybe blindly doing it, but I did feel like there wasn't consideration maybe in regards to how I'm living my life right now. There was almost a little bit of trying to fill in their own gaps, which is, I think, natural, that a lot of people do. We, I think it's maybe a natural behaviour, so there's not a judgment on that person, but it's just difficult to absorb that. So, for example, they were telling me to not live in the past, or worry about the future and present, and talked about Einstein's theory about insanity, about doing the same thing and expecting different results. And all of this was said without the consideration of how I'm living my life right now. And for example, the things I talk about in the podcast and the spiritual work I'm doing on myself, and maybe even these vlogs, there's some awareness, self-awareness of my challenges. And it felt like what was coming from that person was a sense that I'm in this downward spiral of and I'm not doing healthy behaviors. It's kind of if I'm being clear on that, so it was a difficult sort of conversation in that way. It's hard to kind of see it from a bird's eye view, really, and be clear about it. But I think I'm wondering if that's just a natural perception to have when somebody's struggling with their health, that you kind of want to help with that. And initially, and I think what I needed there is almost some not assuming about things, perhaps. Because it felt like the work I am doing on myself in regards to being aware of challenges in my life at the moment, and talking through them, and hopefully in a constructive way where I'm not. This is another thing that was mentioned in this conversation, that you can't keep worrying about stuff and talking, doing that, and hopefully it doesn't. Yes, there is things that are repeated, but it's hopefully in a constructive way. It's not in a way of complaining and regenerating those emotions and keeping those emotions alive again. There's almost a sense of each time there's hopefully a freshness to things, and almost sort of therapeutically talking about them, allowing them to pass through, especially that things have got a very deep groove in them, such as anxiety patterns or low mood patterns, behavior, and things where naturally it's going to be lots of time talking about them, but hopefully I'm not continuing the groove and deepening that, worsening it. I'm sort of, hopefully by talking about it, things are lifting, maybe in a very subtle way. So yeah. So I felt quite trapped and cornered, and I tried to, eventually I was able to say, I've got to go, and they, continued on until they sort of went through what they needed to go through. But maybe there's some awareness that it's about them as well, and they needed to say what, whatever was on their mind, and sort of clear their decks in a way to kind of communicate for me. But yeah, I think this is why I've distanced myself from that, because even to try and engage and explain, and it's all too much for me. And they did say, try, for me to give them a call, and or try and text even. But again, not knowing or understanding that those things are extremely difficult for me, that my health is in such a way, and it was communicated. They said, you've got to push yourself, and and that's when they mentioned Einstein's thing about insanity, and not realizing that again there was an assumption about that that I'm not pushing myself, when hopefully it feels like I'm doing the best I can with things, and I am pushing myself. And I think this is why I distance myself, because this kind of pattern of talk and dialogue, it just sort of it takes away from my energy. It's not what I need to hear, especially at a time of great sensitivity. So yeah, it's kind of almost reinforced why I'm unable to keep certain connections, because of this repeated pattern of things. And maybe earlier on, years ago, I was able to it didn't affect me as much, but now at a place of great sensitivity, it's when things affect me, there's a consequence that I have to deal with, and that maybe they're not aware of, the other party is not aware of. They're just going about their business, and because they haven't got those same challenges, so I can imagine it's hard for them to understand. But so yeah, it was just really, really difficult, really to. And again, one of the other things that was shared is when they were sharing things with me, talking, they kind of used that as an example that, so we're talking now, so why can't we talk in the future? And it's very different to spontaneously run into somebody and sort of withstand, or try and absorb that energy, versus something that's pre-planned and other things. And they're trying to be compassionate, and then they offered, even if we talk for 2 minutes on the phone, and 2 minutes is enough for you, then you can tell me to hang up. And again, those things, I just it adds to the strain of my health, where in order for me to speak up for myself, it's too much for me to do, and it's that balance that I've mentioned before, about how much to push myself and how much to try to protect myself, and those sort of things. And it feels like right now it's safer to not push myself, especially with the chest pain and other things I'm dealing with. It's sort of safer to not do that. There's perhaps a more gentler way to push myself that's not as sharp as having to deal with a social interaction, or social sort of a relationship, where that's a great source of anxiety for me. Yeah, and it's tricky, because if it happened again, it just feels like I'm trapped. There's no clear words that come to mind where I can stop the interaction and just walk away. Because, for example, if I was to say, I'm really sorry, I can't talk, it's just too much for me to to talk to you, or it just feels like too personal, too rude, too sharp to say that to somebody. But I wonder if it's worth me having a sentence sort of semi-memorized. So if I do bump into somebody, because obviously a location where I live, there's various connections and relationships that I find difficult, that of people who live in the vicinity, that just like I ran into this person, I could run into somebody else the next day. That can say that won't provoke more conversation. I won't try and think. My mind wants to think of it now, just to say maybe I can try. Maybe if I was to say something like, my health is very difficult at the moment. It's too much to explain, but unfortunately, it's too much to communicate with you. I'm not sure if that sounds again too harsh or sharp. Yeah, I'm wondering if I feel quite. Maybe it's a good idea not to try and think of a line now, because I feel like I'm still. I think it's impacted me, this interaction, similar to, I think, the letter, in a sense that is interacted me on a deeper level that's not quite connected to my mind at the moment, where it's not a case where I've got loads of anxiety, but it feels like it's affecting me on a deep level that may manifest later, maybe more chest pain or something. So yeah, because I think what's happening is maybe if you look at these, sort of levels of the surface level and deeper levels, it feels like maybe there's this tiny bit at the surface. There's a tiny bit of there's a word beginning with R, not resistance. What's the word? I can't think of the word. So I try to think of something close to it. Maybe buffer's not the right word, but it's right there, the word. I can't quite get it out. Resilience, that's it. Resilience, yeah. So there's a tiny bit of resilience on the surface. So it seems like on the surface there's a tiny bit of resilience to absorb it, but on the deeper level there isn't a protective shell around that, and it feels like this interaction, it's maybe going to add to sort of emotional pain and difficulty for me on the surface. It's, like, for example, I'm vlogging about it now. I'm not like in bits and on a surface level, but on a deep level I can sense that it's affecting me. And I think that's what's happened with the letter as well, writing to my mum, with the letter, where unbeknownst to me, it's kind of affecting me on a deeper level, and which is manifested perhaps in regards to chest pain, that my mind can't understand, because on the surface I feel like I'm handling it okay, but perhaps on a deep level I'm unaware of how much it's really affecting me. And maybe that's something to do with emotional detachment and dissociation and other things, where maybe I'm not fully connected to the difficulty in that. And I think part of that is also, during that interaction I was probably shutting myself down. Actually, I can sense it now. While they were talking, I was kind of in maybe a freeze state. When they talk about that, flight, fight and freeze, I think there's fawn as well. I think I was in a freeze state, so I wasn't fully able to what am I trying to say here? Maybe I wasn't fully able to be present with their energy. My mind and body were trying to protect me, and perhaps that's why maybe it's affecting me on the deeper level in regards to not thinking clearly now, so I'm not sure if this is making sense. Kind of is, but, and I'm wondering if I was able to be, maybe it was overwhelming, which is why I couldn't be fully present emotionally with that interaction, because it was just, I went into a survival state, which is probably why I try to avoid the interactions and connections, so I don't add to any stress and pain and things I'm trying to clear out from myself. Maybe I can jot this down and talk about it in my next counselling session. That might be a good idea, to talk it through with somebody and get their perspective on it. That might be good. I think after this I may write a little note in my journal to kind of bring that up in the next session. So I'm wondering if there's a different way to handle it if I was to do that again. I don't think there would be, really. Maybe potentially having a clearer explanation to maybe not explain my health in so much respects, but maybe to exit that situation. Maybe something, regards to it sounds, so I think in like sort of advice and videos and therapist tips and psychology tips on YouTube, I think talk about how to kind of exit a conversation, or how to build up a boundary to say, I'm sorry, I can't talk, or I can't, and it feels quite stern. It feels quite stern. Maybe I can research on YouTube how to kind of quickly exit a conversation, and see if anything jibes with me or feels like I can use. Because it felt like I was just struggling with that, really. Because again, it comes back to I can't afford to add any more stress in my life, where I'm at the point where there's chest pressure, chest pain, and that's a clear sign that I'm not able to. That's a clear sign that there is lots of stuff going inside right now, my mind and my body, and that's a signal for that. And I did, I think, mention about chest pain to them, and then it feels like they got the wrong angle from that. They were kind of saying, well, that's why you need to speak to people, and I wasn't able to share that. I do have a small sort of support network, but it all kind of, it gets complicated, and you get in a bit of a tangle of more communication and more conversation when I'm trying to sort of avoid that. So maybe I can come up with something next time to try and communicate to that person. But I kind of just slipped into a survival state of just like a freeze state. I may look at that on YouTube again just to understand that more, but it feels like that's more stuff for me just to process, really. I can almost feel it, the impact of that inside of me. It's not there on the surface, but it's there, that I'm going to have to sort of process that a little bit and deal with it, deal with that as well. Maybe I don't have to deal with it in a sort of analytical way where I have to kind of tear it apart, and maybe I can just deal with it through presence, through just being aware of how my body's feeling, and just be present. Maybe that's a gentle way to just allow that emotion to gradually dissolve, perhaps. It might be a good way to do that, and then potentially come up with a solution to that. So a few things, I guess, to kind of immediately deal with this is to perhaps not ruminate on the conversation. I think that won't do me too much good. maybe focus more on a potential solution or a way to avoid this in the future, with perhaps a sort of a semi-memorized statement, maybe. To be present with my body in this moment to help with what's going on, with the pain or the tightness that's this interaction is causing, and perhaps speak about it in the next counselling session, to see if there is a way for me to avoid this in the future. So it feels like it's quite important for me now to be present and to do my breath work, perhaps mindful breathing, because to immediately sort of cleanse this, and so it doesn't accumulate with the rest of what I'm dealing with that I'm not able to do. So I feel like that can be belittled quite a lot, when it's only because I'm so sensitive right now, that I can that I can feel that it's good to kind of deal with the emotional response or the feeling senses in my body, but that can be belittled, that when you go through a difficult interaction or difficult emotions, that to deal with it later, or to say to yourself, it's not a big deal, but really it's surprising how much our bodies go through and what we absorb, and it's kind of been clear for me, because so much has been accumulated, where perhaps in the past I've tried to, or I've felt like it's that I'm okay, I can deal with it, but really perhaps I haven't been open. Perhaps the strength is to be open to how it really makes you feel. I think that's one of the things that I've not been doing. I've maybe been closing off to that. I think it may be good to wrap this up now. So these are the few things I can do. Maybe a quick talk about other things than this as well. I got to I had a positive start to the day. I woke up. I kind of woke up early and I was tired, but I managed to kind of get up at a good time, and immediately took a shower and did all the medicated body wash and all that stuff. So I came out of the shower, a lot earlier than I have done in a long time, and managed to do a tiny bit of cleaning in the bathroom. There's a couple of very small parts in the shower cubicle and other, where it needed a tiny bit of a clean. Still, I need a better clean in like the shower cubicle and the tiles, to do like a once over, but there's areas I managed to do, and I washed the dishes as well, and so it's kind of, I got some good momentum this morning, and I met up with somebody and managed to have sort of social interaction. Met up with a family member and managed to. That's a positive, that I managed to have to do that for myself, and I managed to get in some good exercise as well. So that's a positive. And on the way back home, I took a detour to go to a bigger supermarket to get a few groceries, and one thing I forgot to mention, and I wanted to mention in the vlog, is when I saw the doctor yesterday, I think it was yesterday, all of my physical stuff in regards to my chest pain was clear, so my ECG and my blood tests, but one thing came up in my blood test. The doctor told me that I'm pre-diabetic, which was, I'm still absorbing that really. So that was a bit of a wake-up call and difficult to process, because I feel like I'm dealing with certain things now, and there's another thing to deal with on top of things I'm dealing with already. So it's given me a bit of it spurred me on a bit to try and just, at least for the time being, to do my best to be more conscious of what I'm eating. And it feels like it's going to be a real struggle for me to keep this up. So I'm not trying to burn myself out or reacting in a panic way to think, okay, I've got to stop having anything unhealthy. But it's given me a little bit of a shock to hear that. So I'm kind of just still processing that stuff. And the doctor said being pre-diabetic automatically triggers a dietitian being in contact with me. So hopefully I'll get some support with that. But it feels like it's all interlinked. I find depression and anxiety and binge eating, it's like a response to everything else. It's all tied into each other. So it's going to be a big challenge for me to deal with this as well, because there's so I'm trying not to look at it that I've got. It's like another challenge to deal with. Like I'm dealing with my mental health, recent chest pain, dissociation and brain fog, and just managing my day-to-day, and now the pre-diabetic stuff with my body. So I'm trying to absorb it in a holistic way, to think, okay, let's just not panic, and let's put a little bit of attention into what I'm eating and what I'm drinking and how much of this I'm doing, my exercise. So it feels like that's the right approach. Like today, for instance, there was a clear thought of, okay, let's get on a good walk today, and a clear thought to, okay, let's get some healthy groceries to cook my next meal with, which I've done today. And yesterday evening I cooked some noodles with some tofu and a few sort of frozen vegetables. So I've got that sort of leftovers to have tonight. So hopefully it feels like I'm taking this in my stride, even though it's a bit of a shock, and there are thoughts in my body that I just want to give up, and it's another thing to deal with. So there is that negativity, but there's also a part in my mind that's kind of taking a bit of a holistic approach to it, to think, okay, this is where I stand with my body. It's got this condition, pre-diabetic, and there's some clear actions I can take, which I'm trying to do not in a stressful way, and knowing that it's going to be a long journey, that I don't want to just do like a 100-meter dash nutritional wise and just suddenly turn my diet upside down, but maybe small little steps. I know I'm talking fast now. I think maybe part of that's just my health at the moment. I think talking about it's a certain stress to do that, and I've had a bit of caffeine today as well. So another small thing, for example, I did today is I had no sugar in my coffee, which was really positive. So when I went out and met a family member, I had no sugar in the coffee I had, which was really good. So again, I just want to acknowledge myself for that, the positivity, and even with this interaction, difficult interaction I had, I still feel in this moment, I feel sort of strong, and I feel there's a bit of resilience in me, even though it's affecting me on some level that I need to kind of still process and deal with. But maybe there's a bit of resilience in me, and it's good to maybe acknowledge that. perhaps part of that was the momentum from this morning. Perhaps it's given me a bit of energy to take this interaction more in my stride and not just to collapse, which is quite a common outcome when I come up against something. Even with this pre-diabetic sort of current diagnosis with my physical health, it doesn't feel like I've collapsed, which is maybe a positive. Maybe it's a positive in that. So I'm going to take that as a sort of as a positive, but not hold it in stone. Not to think, okay, I can't. I need to build on this and not look back, because maybe a collapse will happen. It feels like my health, there's going to be collapses and building again and that kind of stuff. So I'm much more. So that's why I use the word sort of holistic, because I'm not doing like a 100-meter dash, just pulling in all my effort to do an action. I feel there's a bit more of a steady balance and a steady foundation that I'm building, and not just sort of running up and hoping I don't fall back down again. So maybe that's a positive thing to recognize as well, that there's a steadiness to knowing that sometimes small steps and a steady pace is better in regards to my health right now, instead of just going in there full force, all guns blazing. And which can work for a lot of people, but I think it's important to know what's best for me right now. So yeah, there's clarity on that. Maybe there'll be some awareness this afternoon, perhaps, to do some activities or something to help with me not collapsing with the pre-diabetic news. And this interaction finds there's a bit of adrenaline in me because I've just had a long walk back, but maybe there's some awareness where I don't want to, perhaps I want to help with, maybe I have to word this right, but I want to help with not collapsing. So because it feels like it's in some ways, yes, I feel a bit resilient, but as my energy dips and it's collapsing is not far away. So those kind of thoughts about just move my tripod. It's gonna fall now, isn't it? Yeah, I'll hold it up for the moment. So hopefully I can minimize any sort of negative thoughts that come up, that may arise from what I've had to deal with the last couple of days. So hopefully I can have a positive or a mindful afternoon and evening with regards to how I'm feeling. So even if I do feel down or low, that I can be mindful about it, so I don't sort of maybe go into any sort of destructive activities or more destructive thoughts. So I'm going to try and do that this afternoon, I think, and evening. And maybe I can check in over the weekend, and be good to do that, to see how I'm doing in regards to processing this news and dealing with today's interaction as well. See how my body and mind is responding. But yeah.